Hello, I'm Joyce Woodworth. Welcome to the Spirit of the Heartland. Today we're going to find out about landscaping with native plantings, meaning plants that originated here in the Heartland and grow well here. We're going to visit the Prairie Moon Nursery today in Wiskoy Valley, very near Winona, to learn how they help with preserving our native plants and how they use and sell them for ecological preservation and restoration. We traveled over the hill from Winona on County Road 17 off of Interstate 90 into Wiskoy Valley to the Prairie Moon Nursery, which grows oodles of native plantings. To find out about the nursery itself, the farmstead it's located on, and most important, learn about the advantages of going native with your landscaping. Well, I'm sitting here with Bill Carter, who's the president of the Prairie Moon Nursery, which I understand, Bill, has been here for 27 years.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been that long.
Yeah. How did you ever get started here?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but just shortly, one of the folks that got it started, Alan Wade, he had developed an interest in this because his parents had been involved. They started the first native plant nursery in Illinois, and that was Dot and Doug Wade. Doug Wade had been a student of Aldo Leopold's, and so he was kind of a pioneer of the whole ecology movement. Alan had been doing a number of things, but finally started growing some seeds and plants for his mother's nursery in Illinois. Got good at it. Other people joined in out here, and it started out as a little basically a business operating out of his back porch into where we're at today, where we provide over 600 different species throughout the upper Midwest. Well, the nursery actually does propagation and plantings on about 40 acres. It has some land that Prairie Moon owns up on the ridge, which is 45 acres, but then Prairie Moon started out here. This is actually land owned by Wiskoy Valley Land Cooperative. We have 365 acres here that's owned communally by about 12 families here. And on this land, we farm about 30 acres.
Many of the residents of the land co-op are also owners and workers at the nursery. Their homes overlook the prairies, and their children enjoy the ponds. The public is invited for 2 tours in the summertime to experience what the land has to offer. Prairie Moon has chosen well for its nursery, which is partially on the ridge, the hillsides, and in the valley, offering a diverse landscape for producing native plants and seeds for wetlands, prairies, savannas, and woodlands. What exactly does that mean, native plantings?
Okay, the way we define it, most people accept a definition now, are species that have been here since before white settlement. So around here, that's about 200 years. And you think of prairies, usually places where corn grows now. Those were all tall grass prairies at one point. Very few small areas left, except we're blessed out here in the fact that we have what is called goat prairies, and these southwest facing hillsides out here, many of them retain the native plants that have always been there.
Now I believe that one of your success stories is on a goat land prairie that you're trying to restore on Garvin Heights in Winona, is that correct?
Oh, right. Well, we provided a lot of seed for that, but the folks at Winona State University worked on that. And for folks in the area, if you're ever up on Garvin Heights and then just look off to the left, well, I know they have signage up there. It's a beautiful prairie. There's just a lot of wonderful things coming back in there. And, going back historically to the way that would have been, hundreds of years ago.
In 2003, Winona State University began a restoration project spearheaded by botanist Carol Jefferson on top of Garvin Heights to bring back the integrity of the goat prairie landscape and the bur oak savanna to our treasured hilltop. The restoration of Garvin Heights is an ongoing effort by the City of Winona and the university to eradicate and control the invasive buckthorn and honeysuckle species which endanger the habitat of the bluffs. Looking down the steps of the walking path, which were voluntarily built by Winona State student Peter Simon, we can see the invasive buckthorn crowding the area on the left, opposed to the beauty of the functional native plantings on the right of the steps. Well, describe to us why people would desire to plant native plantings as opposed to, something that's not native to this area.
Right, and I think all of us have a variety of plantings. I've got tulips in front of my house. We're not totally purists. But the biggest thing when we're looking at these plantings is we're restoring the biodiversity that was once there. The plants that were here originally are really what has made the area what it is today. You look at the cornfields, without the tall grass prairies providing the nutrients and building up the soil, we'd never have those cornfields now. So we're going historically back to what had been. And when you restore the biodiversity of plants, that's one step, and then that starts bringing back the insects, which brings back the birds and other species out there, and suddenly you have this huge, huge diversity of species that are out there that we haven't seen for a long time. Just long term, you would see like the major grasses like the big blue stem Indian grass, and of course some of the smaller ones like little blue stem. Fully half of their roots break down every year into the soil and help build it up. Now people see the dead material on top of the ground, but with those plants there's as much mass below the ground as there is above the ground. And that all helps build the soil up each year. And then of course you have your native legumes that put nitrogen back in the soil. The whole idea is you get a whole diversity of plants that are out there all doing little things out there to the soil. The other thing are these are the plants that were born and bred here. They're the plants that, you get extra cold winters, extra dry summers, whatever, big floods, they survive all of that. Which a lot of the imports that we've brought in, which are nice to look at sometime, but they just can't handle that. We're always out there tending them, or they're having bug problems or different things. Where the natives, they really stand up to things quite well.
This is Becky Klukas-Brewer, who's kind of going to show us around some of the fields and some of the flowers, be a little specific for us, and tell us about this garden right here.
Sure,
it's different.
sure. This is, we call it the lower garden at Prairie Moon. This is where we do a lot of our plant production. So for seed production, we can just have a diverse prairie and clip seed heads. But here we'll grow things in monocultures in a garden bed. And during the dormant seasons, spring and fall, we'll dig the roots and pack the roots to ship to our customers.
This, I can tell, this is phlox.
Yeah.
But how does this differ from regular phlox that you'd buy at a nursery in town?
Sure. Well, it is a native phlox. This particular one is marsh phlox. A lot of the plants here you'll see in the lower garden are wetter species because we can control the moisture here a little better. It's a very low ground. One way you can tell phlox from what you might think is a phlox at another nursery, but it's actually not a phlox, is the number of petals. In a native phlox, you'll find 5 petals. In a non-native phlox, such as a non-native dame's rocket, people often confuse for a phlox. You'll see it on the roadsides in July, and it's very similar in color. It blooms about the same time, almost the same size of the plant, but the dame's rocket has 6 petals. Okay. So that's a really good way to tell. If we can just look straight over there is a whole garden bed of nodding onion. They're called nodding onion because when they do bloom, they just slightly nod over. It's a beautiful pink onion flower. So Joyce, behind us is, you can see the whitish green ball flowers there. That's rattlesnake master, and that's a real typical plant of the prairie that you would have seen here 200 years ago. And behind that, red is kind of rare to find in a prairie. A lot of yellows, purples, whites in a prairie or in a wetland, but the red cardinal flower is really desirable because it is such a beautiful red.
Below look like strawberries,
and
those look like phlox?
Yep, exactly. Yep, they're wild strawberries. Everybody knows this plant, but this is the wild variety, so much smaller berry, but excellent for landscaping. It spreads nicely on the ground. Beautiful fall color with the leaves. And behind us, if you're also considering landscaping, this is a nice native grass to landscape with. It needs a wetter soil, but this is called cord grass. And a lot of people will call and want ornamental grasses. It's a real trend lately, so cordgrass would be a really nice ornamental grass, I think.
Oh boy, it's really fragrant around here.
That's because of the prairie sage, Joyce. This is prairie sage, and if you do, indeed take a leaf and smell it, it does smell a lot like sage. So this is another, typical prairie plant, and quite beautiful. You don't have to have you know, a flower to have beauty, because this plant in itself with the different leaf color is just really beautiful. It gives a lot of diversity to a planting.
Really nice color, especially contrasted with the dark green behind it.
Right.
And this one, the smell is so wonderful. It smells like Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I wonder if the Native Americans then probably introduced this to the Pilgrims for their turkey dinner.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
It was probably brought in, you know, possibly even brought into this part of the state, you know, by the Native Americans. It maybe wasn't found naturally here that they did bring it in, but we still considered a native then.
Sure. And what about this pretty one back here? It's not totally in bloom anymore, it doesn't look
Yeah,
like.
this plant is just finishing out its bloom cycle. This is fireweed, and if anybody's ever been to Alaska, you've probably seen fireweed everywhere. So a real prolific plant that we'd find in many of the states in North America. So that's a real nice plant as well.
From the garden that holds the plantings that are designed for the wetland areas, we walk to the garden further up to the plantings that generally are found in a drier soil, such as our prairies or savannas.
This is where we do a lot of our drier species, and because they're drier, a lot of them will be shorter. So some of these are good for home landscaping if you don't want such a tall prairie plant next to your house. Right here is the harebell. A beautiful, you know, delicate little flower that has a really long bloom time. You know, this has been going for almost a couple months now. Really versatile with sun and soil. It can take a wide variety of sun exposures, nearly full shade to, you know, you can see here is in full sun. Next to it, right here, we have a beard tongue. This is, a lot of people know the botanical name penstemon. This is the hairy beard tongue. And that's a really nice plant. The bees love the beard tongues. And next to that, you have a starry campion. So this is a beautiful white flower, kind of shaped like a star. If you want, you know, more a plant that really spreads, and you know, we kind of encourage it to come out of the garden bed like this. This is the Bush's poppy mallow. That's a beautiful fuchsia plant, and again, this one has been blooming for probably almost a couple months now. So I'm standing here in front of American cranberry bush. It's a viburnum. I don't think we've talked about many trees, shrubs, or vines yet that we have growing at Prairie Moon, but we do have a handful. You know, really nice cranberry bush-looking berries there. They will turn a brighter red as the fall, you know, the summer turns into fall. And before this, they were a brilliant green berry, and before that, a really nice white, fragrant flower. So that's an excellent shrub for landscaping. Standing in front of a bed of bird's foot violet. This is a very typical dry prairie species, so you can see a prairie species doesn't have to be, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 feet tall. And then Joyce, behind me here, you see a beautiful bed of rock pink. Some beautiful color there, again, a lower growing dry species.
Becky takes me along the path of the dry garden area to point out some of the most popular native plants for a country garden, like native baby's breath and wild lupine. Native plantings are not only beautiful on top of the soil while providing a wildlife habitat for the insects and birds, but underneath the soil, their roots, which may travel 20 feet below the earth, are anchoring the soil and protecting the hillsides from erosion, as well as improving water quality by acting as a filter for the runoff that flows down the hillsides into the waterways below. Well, we're standing in one of your beautiful meadows here. This is sort of a hillside meadow, very sunny. I know that this meadow has a bit of history. Let's talk about it.
Well, this is one of the first, well, meadows, prairies, people use that interchangeably. And this is one of the first prairies planted on the farm here. Now, we had existing goat prairies, native prairies. This was the first one that was introduced with seed then. And it was quite a feat. There were only 3 people involved with Prairie Moon then. It was before my time. It was quite weedy because we were still learning how to do some of this. Almost lost it a few times, they thought, but came out, did a lot of hand weeding, getting everything out of here. And now we burn it off, usually about every 2 to 3 years, and keep it up, add a few more seeds to it here and there.
A thatch layer can build up over the years, causing some native species to grow poorly. Therefore, burning is one of the most important management techniques for native plantings. After 2 or 3 growing seasons, most native plantings need to be burned annually for the next 5 or more years to become well established.
But really, at this point, it's continue to get better. You don't really have to do very much to it at all.
Mm-hmm.
I would guess there's probably 75 plus species right in through this area right here.
That's wonderful.
Which on a real native prairie, that would just be a touch. A native prairie, you might have 300 species in an area like this. So, people talk about restoring prairies. It's something that literally to really restore would take, maybe 1,000 years, but we're doing the best we can right now.
Becky points out some of the more unique native plants found in this meadow.
This plant here is the obedient plant. We have a couple of different obedient plants at Prairie Moon, but the reason it got its common name is because if you move the flowers, they will move and they'll obey where you put them. So that's kind of a neat thing about that plant. Typical of a wetter soil, we use the term mesic as a medium soil. So this would be found in probably a wet mesic, so a little a medium to a medium moist soil. And around the plant you'll see here is stiff goldenrod. Goldenrods are very good for honeybees and other insects, as a lot of the native plants are. And this here is the pale Indian plantain. The plantains are nice prairie species. And around the big blue stem you'll see early sunflower. Another really nice prairie species, very easy to grow from seed. And if we can get over here, we have a little bit of the monarda, which is also called bee balm, because the bees do really love the monarda species. This is your typical purple coneflower. And right here is almost done blooming, but this is the pale purple coneflower, so both echinacea species. This is actually a wildflower. It's not a shrub or a bush. This is a baptisia. It was a white wild indigo blooming in probably May and June. So this is just one little tiny snippet of a tallgrass prairie.
Fall is a good time for harvesting the seeds and also a good time for planting. Seeds germinate best in cool soil. At Prairie Moon, we observe the harvesting of some tall wildflower seeds from a wetland area. This group of workers are hand-cutting the cluster of seeds at the top of the stem with small hand size. They collect the seeds in their buckets and bags. From the field, they are sent to the drying areas, one of which is the old barn on the original homestead. Here, the seeds are laid out on tarps to dry. After the seeds drop from the shaft, they are pulled up within the tarp to the rafters of the barn to protect them from the rodents and birds until it is time to send them for further cleaning. This process takes place in Prairie Moon's new building at the top of the hill.
And this is where they sort them and clean them and where they send them off to their customers. So we're going to go in the building today and see how exactly the seeds are all cleaned and ready for the customers.
This is wood betony, which we've collected off the farm down below. It grows on hillsides, and the seed is stuck down inside these little pods here. And this machine, which is a hammer mill, will break this apart. If you look just quickly here, you can see the little screen in the background, which is different sizes. And then these are little plastic hammers, so it breaks the seed apart but doesn't damage the seed. And then I'll have Arnell over here demonstrate how this machine works. Now Joyce, down at the bottom here, seed that's broken apart comes through here, but we still have to find the actual individual seeds in here. So the seed will go into this next machine right here called a fanning mill. It goes through a series of screens, and then the cleaner seed will come out in the bottom. It's still not perfectly clean, but if you look through it, you can see the individual seeds down here. And the last process, we'll take it into with the fan and the blower table and blow off the light material and get it down to pure seed. This is actually just a little homemade machine. This is a blower table, and what it does is uses air to separate seed. based on the weight from the chaff. And you can see back here, it's just a little squirrel tail fan in the back that we switch on, blows air out the front, the seed flows down from the top. And Arnell can demonstrate here with the seed that we just cleaned up in the other room. You can see there's little bits of seed down here, but see it rolling around, but this will get it much, much cleaner.
And now tell me a little bit about these seeds. You mentioned what the flower is before, but...
Okay, this is wood betony, and it's actually a little parasitic plant that grows up on the goat prairies around the Winona area here. And what it'll do is it actually pulls nutrients away from other plants, and so it keeps some of the bigger things out, which sometimes is desirable. Other than that, you know, there's a lot of birds, butterflies, and so forth that are attracted to it. But it's a real nice little species, and we're putting in new plantings of it, but we can't ever seem to get enough of it either. But it's expensive. It's like $60 an ounce, 900 a pound. So, but you know, we'll hope to bring the price down.
Sort of like touching gold here, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is probably one of the last rooms your seeds see in your whole building and
Right.
in the whole process.
Yep.
And I see thousands and thousands of little bags with different kinds of seeds in. I love to see the flowers blooming out of each
Potential's
one.
amazing out here. You know,
Yeah.
we always thought if a tornado ever hit this building,
Oh,
we
the
could
seeds
see
would be...
most of Minnesota.
Well, now I also notice outside, I mean, it's a hot, humid day out there, but in here the air seems absolutely perfect.
Right. Well, we usually keep it around 70 degrees and then 30% humidity. And that ensures the seed's going to have a very long shelf life and doesn't go bad for us.
Ah, perfect. Now, I understand you have a nice little example of some of the seeds that you deal with.
Right. Yeah, so we have a lot of different sizes, and people see some of it, they'll see like this is wild lupin. It's like, oh, it's kind of a small seed. Well, look at this one. This is a grass-type plant. Actually, it's a juncus. It's native here in Winona County, juncus interior. 3 million seeds per ounce with this one, and you can just see it's a heavy seed, but very, very fine.
Oh, my.
Doesn't take much. You can do an ounce per acre, and you'll have plenty of this showing up in your planting.
Wow.
And then, as I said, lupin, a lot of people are familiar with it, the native blue wild lupin, which is very, very nice to have, and of course, one of the plants that the endangered Carnered blue butterfly needs to survive with.
It's another fine one.
And this usually has little wings on it, and so in the cleaning process, we try and get it down to pure seed, just like this. If people are familiar with asters, this is New England aster, which is a very common plant around here. It's one of the largest seeds we have. This is wild cucumber. Wow. Real nice little viney plant that grows up places. Sometimes you'll see it going up phone poles even. Common milkweed, which a lot of people are kind of surprised that we have milkweed, but of course, with the monarch butterfly, this is their favorite plant. What they really count on is a nectar source and a place, they feed on the leaves of this, so we'll see our sales on this going up more and more each year. Well, you see a lot of folks in town just like having their butterfly garden, have a few of them around. They're kind of aggressive, but you can pull the ones that sucker up a little bit and keep them under control without too much problem. Right. And they're not as common as they used to be because of the Roundup corn and beans and so forth. There's not as many out in farm fields as there used to be.
Okay. Well, thanks for showing us around. This is really fascinating.
Oh, great. So each plant has its own area where it thrives in. Get the right plant, the right area. It's just the basics of gardening. That's just what works real well for things. 20 years ago, everybody thought these were weeds, basically. There were, a few people were aware of these species, but now more and more. And of course, with the, people having more understanding of ecology, people are more interested in this stuff. And people are just much more aware of the plants, the native plants that are around us. We sell a lot of mixes to folks like that. We also work with the agencies. The DNR is doing a wonderful job of restoring areas, especially our state parks, and also the DOT, both especially the state DOT, but here in Winona County too. They're really working hard to preserve some of the native plants, and they're putting up road signs for not spraying and so forth, so they can preserve these areas throughout the county.
You've been working with the ecosystem now for 20-some years. Oh, so what is it like to be a part of saving our ecosystem and preserving it here?
Well, it's an honor, Before this, you know, it's funny how we all get into things, but I worked as an RN for 20 years, and I was just lucky enough to happen to move to this area, get to know Alan and the other people who had been involved in Prairie Moon. And it's something that, although I've had botanical training and so forth in college, it's just something as soon as I found it, I couldn't read enough about it. I come to work, I feel very lucky. I come to work every day excited to come in, excited to do it. I'll tell you, when you find a job that you can just enjoy doing every day, it's great. Sometimes all I have to do to get in a really good mood is start picking up the phone and answering it and talking to customers. And they just put me in a great mood for the rest of the day.
Great. Well, thank you so much for
Sure.
meeting with us here. Thank you for joining me today at the Prairie Moon Nursery in Wiscoy Valley. You can learn more about landscaping with ecological preservation in mind by contacting them at 507-452-1362 or by checking out their website. Please join me again next week. Till then, enjoy the spirit of the heartland.